Welcome to Demonstrated Success webinar, Beyond STAR and NWEA, the power of running records and local screeners to inform instruction. We are here with you for the hour with the wonderful Karen Matzo. I'm going to ask you all to write all of your questions in the Q&A box, and I will interrupt Karen when we can and get all of her answers. She wants you to talk to her. She wants you to ask questions. So keep them coming. If one of you has something helpful to say to the other one, if we can just have that all running in the Q&A box, that would be terrific. And at the very end, I'll unmute you for further discussion. Or if we feel like a question isn't getting in-depth enough for you, just let me know and I'll unmute you at that point too. We're just doing mute because everyone's at home and everyone has some background noises, which makes it a little difficult if we don't have mute on. But I'm sure you're all Zoom professionals at this point. So without further ado, Karen, I'll let you start. Thanks so much.
Morning, everybody. I hope you're good. It's a great day, you know, more or less, aside from everything else that's going on in the world. The sun is shining. So hi. I'm excited for today's webinar because I feel like it's an important conversation right now, is, you know, how we're starting the school year with regard to assessment. And we were compelled to share this webinar mostly in response to the conversations around social emotional learning and the start of the school and the emotional state of our students and what we need to do at the beginning of school to, sorry, actually, I'm gonna have to mute myself for 1 second because I have some activity in my house that needs to go away. 1 sec.
While Karen's muted, I'll unmute myself and just remind you all to check our website regularly. We are continuing to post different webinars and meetings that may be applicable to you. And also, I'd love to remind you that if you have an idea of something that you would like to see as a webinar, please reach out and let us know, because if you're thinking it, I'm sure others are as well. And we are here to help you in as many ways as we can, and would love to be given the opportunity to know if we can create a webinar for you to help you get further understanding of your needs.
Back. Thanks. Sorry. The danger of adult children at home. So what I was saying is the beginning of the thought for this webinar was we need to come up with some different ways to think about figuring out where our children are when they come back after this long hiatus. And that's going to be challenging because we want to protect them and sort of the fragility with which they're coming back to school after not being here, and after for some of them and many of them going through some struggles and challenges in the last few months. So the outcomes today, I'm hoping you will all leave here fully understanding what a running record does that an assessment like NWEA or STAR does not do, and why it gives you better diagnostic information. And then I am going to go through the basics of conducting a running record. I'm sure many of you have done this and you know about this. Maybe some of you don't, and then it's new. This will not enable you, if it is brand new, it won't enable you to then walk away and conduct a running record, but it is going to be a darn good start. And at the end, we're going to talk about some other formative assessments that you can use. All right, so why now? Why do we want to use running records and informal assessment now? I am so sure that all of you have had this conversation and that you've heard conversations about the stress level for our kids, for our teachers, for our leaders as we come back to school. I would assume that nobody's planning on sitting the kids down in the first 3-4 weeks of school to have them take a computerized assessment. Maybe at the upper grades that could be possible, but I think the general agreement has been to keep stress low and to focus on building relationships as we start this school year. These kids haven't been in school. They don't know you yet. You might even wind up virtual with them at the beginning, although I hope not, and it's looking unlikely, at least in New Hampshire. So when we think about sort of low stress and relationship building assessment opportunities, right, we can think about informal opportunities to gather information. And I think that the assessments that we're going to talk about today will do that for you. The information that you get from a running record or from any of these early literacy screeners that we're going to talk about, it's very actionable immediately. So, you know, it really gives you an opportunity to sit one-on-one with a student, depending on how much time you have, right? It's very adaptable. You can get information quickly. You can get more in-depth information with a bigger and more comprehensive formal running record. So it allows you flexibility, which I think is very important right now. You know, depending on, we have to be responsive to our kids. And I did want to make a suggestion that I'm going to make at our principal community conversations, is to consider coming into school early. Having, you know, there's 3 additional professional development days that I think the state is insisting on for teachers, that it might be a good idea to think about using some of that time to have, if not all of your students come in early, some of your students come in early, one at a time, to be able to sit down and have this opportunity with them, where you could sit and meet them and conduct sort of, you know, some low stress information gathering. So, you know, I named NWEA and STAR, obviously, because they're the most frequently used in New Hampshire as universal screeners. They're great universal screeners. We all use them for that. We give them at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. At the beginning of the year, many of us use them to slice and dice and sort kids for intervention, for different groupings of classes if you're switching classes. They're excellent universal screeners. They are also important to make sure that your students are keeping up with the national average, right? So sometimes we wonder, do we need NWEA? Do we need STAR if it's not giving us great diagnostic information? The truth is, we do need it, because if all of your assessments were local assessments, it is possible that your students would come out looking incredibly rosy, right? If you made them easy enough, right? So NWEA and STAR and other nationally normed assessments just keep us assured that we are keeping up with the national average. And so most of your curriculum coordinators will insist on keeping assessments like NWEA and STAR. They're also great for annual growth, like I said, beginning, middle, and end. And you have a nice, you know, September score and a nice June or May or June score. And they're great for showing you what might need more probing. Any questions yet, Beth?
No questions yet? Nope.
Okay. And this is the thing that I'm sure many of you have felt, they're not great in terms of diagnostic information. It's hard sometimes to look at your NWEA and your STAR and know where to start with a student. And I know that NWEA has developed that, I can't remember what it's called, but it has a funny name. But it gives you a list depending on the RIT score a student has. It gives you a list of where they're ready to start learning, what they know, but the truth of the matter is that list is a generic list. It's not responsive precisely to that student's needs. And it's the same with STAR, because the subtests from STAR are actually extrapolated out or projected out from the overall scale score. So a kid, the scale score is really the only one that's statistically significant in that way, and they take all of the sub areas and project out on where a student would be based on their performance. But in reality, a student may not have gotten questions around a specific skill right, that's reported in that subscore. Because in 20 minutes or 25 minutes, right, how many different questions can you possibly get? So these sorts of informal local assessments that we're going to talk about now, they get at a kid's individual strengths and weaknesses, and they tell you where that student needs to begin learning. So excuse the Performance Plus image, but it's the data that I have access to. And what I did was here, this is a grade 2 data sample in Performance Plus. It's STAR data in Performance Plus. And I just wanted to point out the way that it's reported. So we have, you know, fluency, right? Phonics and word recognition, text craft and structure, key ideas and details, vocabulary. So this, it's set up, right? It reports out along the lines of the Common Core, the Common Core, right? New Hampshire College and Career Ready Standards by cluster, which is great, right? This is all good information. And you can see here, but again, I don't know where to start with my kids, right? So once I have that information, there's all of these different standards, okay? These are the word phonics and word recognition. So we have, this is the general standard that we would need to address. I don't quite know. These are the standards that relate to the STAR report, okay? But we don't really know from that information where to start in addressing these standards based on that information. I'm looking here, like if we go down to reading literature 2.7, use information gained from the illustrations and words in a print or digital text to demonstrate understanding of its characters, setting, or plot. Right? So the NWEA and the STAR data aren't going to tell us whether a student is struggling with character development, plot development, setting, whether the student is using illustrations, whether he or she is using words, okay, to make sense out of all of those story elements. It's not going to tell us, if we go up to the top here, know and apply grade level phonics and word analysis skills. It'll tell us that a student's having trouble or excelling in that, but it's not going to tell us precisely what a student knows and what a student doesn't know. Any comments around that, Beth?
Nothing yet.
Okay. And this slide is just telling you that what I just said, right? So we don't know the phonics knowledge that the student's lacking. Fluency, we have no idea about fluency. We haven't read with the student. So we go to running records. So a running record is an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to use the errors that a student makes and the self-corrections that a student makes to draw conclusions about how that child is thinking about their reading. And if you can figure out how a child is thinking about their reading and the reason for an error or the reason for a self-correction, then you know where to go instructionally with that child, is basically the meaning of this quote. And I'm going to be drawing on Teachers College Reading and Writing Project work throughout, so just notice that reference at the bottom. So in terms of a running record, you need a lot less than you might think you need, right? So many people across New Hampshire are familiar with the Fountains and Pinnell benchmark assessment, which I love. I love that it's authentic. I love that it's real. It's books. It's the natural process of reading. There's fiction. There's nonfiction. There's rich images, graphs, and really good stuff in that box. And it gets really great information. The downfalls are, if you don't have it, you don't have it, right? And we also all know, for those of us that have administered it, takes a while, right? I mean, you're looking, if you are not practiced at it, at 40 minutes per student, and if you're practiced at it, a half an hour, 20 minutes to a half an hour, depending. Obviously more for kids in upper grades. So when we think about running records, the focus of this webinar is really helping all of you to be flexible as you start the year. The tenor of this webinar might be different if we weren't starting the year the way that we are. So this is very specific. Some of what I'm saying is very specific to wanting to help everyone maximize the resources that they have to get the most information they can in a gentle way with students as they start school this year. So for a running record, right, the student needs text at their level. And it's great if it's a book, but there's also so many pieces of text that are available at all different grade levels via the internet for free through various organizations and companies. So you're going to need a pencil. And if a student is beyond mid-first grade, right, you're going to want to take a look at fluency. Before that, you can, you can't, but you know, no one's that fluent when they're reading word for word, if they are even reading word for word. So the general rule is that you're not going to measure fluency until probably mid-first grade, sometimes beginning of first grade. So these are the nice to haves. It's lovely to have a teacher copy of the text with the word count, with the space for comments, with a space to put your analysis of the mistakes. And it's lovely to have text-based comprehension questions. You don't need them. You can develop them, right? It's nice to have a fluency rubric. It's nice to have a retelling rubric. I will share with you later in the webinar some tools that you can use. So what are we going to find out in a running record? A lot. If you really focus in on it, it's a lot of information. We can figure out what information a student is using from the text, from pictures, from graphics, or what they are not using to help them read and figure out unknown language. We can figure out their specific strategies. We can figure out their disposition of reading. So are they self-checking? Are they hearing themselves as they read? Are they risk-taking? Or do they constantly, while you're reading with them, are they asking you to provide the unknown word, right? Because their attitude, their approach, their confidence will make a difference. Are they stopping to reread? Or are they just completely ignoring a nonsensical word or substitution, right? So that goes back to, are they hearing themselves? And do they even have the discipline to go back? Is it making sense to them? So they're self-monitoring, that's all related, right? How many of those errors are they self-correcting? We can hear about their fluency. Are they reading word for word? Are they reading with in chunks of words, you know, chunks of 2, chunks of 3, in full phrases? Are they attending to punctuation? Are their voices going down at the period? Are they going up at a question mark? Are they pausing at commas, right? We can hear all of that good information, which gives us something to work on that's very specific for that child. And obviously comprehension, because comprehension is the ultimate purpose of reading. So is the student engaging with text? Does the student stop and make comparisons or parallels to their own life? Are they noticing things? Do they make personal comments about the text? Can the student retell the story? And are they using punctuation, expression, and intonation? As I was saying before, that also has to do with comprehension. Or are they reading robotically, like they're not making sense of the text?
I'm just going to interrupt for a minute, Karen. I'm going to write it in the chat session. Someone wrote a question, but for some reason, I've never had this happen before. I cannot open up Q&A, which has never happened I've done a number of these and I've always clicked on it and.
I have it. Are we including grades 1 through 5 in this discussion? Yes, for running records, absolutely. Yeah. Kelly, if you have more questions around that, certainly type them in, okay?
And if you want, we could have them actually use the chat. I can see the chat box, but I cannot open up Q&A. I don't know why that is.
It's okay. I get an indicator, Beth, when someone types something. I can.
All
right. All right. So I wanted to just show you, and I'm sure that many of you have seen this and some of you haven't, right? So this is a finished running record. Okay, and you can see here, just to talk to you about the parts, right? The page numbers, or this can be also the line numbers. Clearly this was a beginning level book, so there was only a certain amount of language. If you can see over here in the, this is the whole story, had 99 words for this book. And you can see that in this particular form, right, this teacher was fortunate because they have the language of the book in front of them, okay? And this teacher has gone across, and as the student has read, right, they check off the words that are read. And it's also lovely here, there's a key, okay, over to tell you about what this means. And these are miscue analysis, and I'm going to talk more about this. I think that this is the piece that a lot of teachers don't do after their running records or during their running records. And, you know, there's different, I think sometimes because of time and know-how, a teacher might do a running record just to establish reading level. And it's easy to figure out words per minute and get some comprehension questions done. I think that this is the first thing to go is the miscue analysis, whereas the miscue analysis actually tells you a great deal. So this is what the whole thing would look like. And you can see at the bottom, there's an accuracy rate, right? So 92% accurate. Oops. And then we have the error rate is, so one for every 12 errors, right, there's one self-correction is this child's error rate, which is, I think we would want certainly a better error rate than that. Oh, sorry, the error rate is 1 out of, sorry, that's self-correction over there. So 1 out of every 12 words is an error. And over here, this feels much better, actually. I'm kind of relieved because 1 out of 4 times a student is self-correcting himself. Okay. I'm just checking out the chat for a sec to make sure.
Can you hear me, Karen?
Yeah, I'm just looking. Sarah has written something in. It is extremely important that the teacher does not face the student or interact with them in any way beyond the acceptable responses based on the directions of a given running record. Okay, and then
a lane above it.
Yeah, where did you get that template? Did it come with the book or text? So this template is downloaded from Reading A to Z. I have a blank template that we're gonna give you. There's 1,000, right? So we have that for you. I wanna go back to Sarah's comment. So Sarah, I agree with you completely. When you are creating, when you are doing a running record, I agree with you. It will compromise the reliability and validity of the running record if you don't follow the directions of a specific running record tool. Okay? And I think that reliability and validity is extraordinarily important. At the same time, if you are doing an informal running record, I mean, if you're doing a conference with a kid and you decide to do a running record, a minute-long running record while you're conferring, that can also be different. So you can do a running record in a formal way and in an informal way. And if you are conducting a running record that's formal, you're using the BAS kit, let's say, I think it's really important to do it with fidelity, or else you'll compromise the reliability. And, you know, part of the work that we do in DS is helping schools to common score and calibrate their running records with the tools that they're using. So I concur, but I also want to leave people with the impression that you can do an informal running record and be a little more casual about it and use it as an opportunity just to collect information for instruction. All right. So this is, I just wanted to show you, I wanted to point out that down over here, do you see how the student text is not present? So when you get pretty good at this, you don't need the text in front of you. And what that does is it frees you. If you're conferring with a student and you go over and you have 6 or 7 minutes with him or her, and you're not even sure what book that student is reading, you can make up your own generic form that you keep with you to take a quick running record. Okay, a minute long, boom, just a taster about how that student is reading at that level. And so I just wanted to show you here that you don't need the student text per se. You don't even need this fancy form. You can create a simple form that you use while you're conferring with students. Okay. Thinking about errors. So, and again, I want to convey that there are different tools that have different rules for administering. And it's important that you adhere to the rules that your grade level team is using. So let's say you even wanted to, because, you know, I've seen schools where they've changed the cut scores, where they've made certain accommodations around running records. And listen, it's not the best. We all know you should use a tool to fidelity. But if for some reason the entire grade level team decides to make an alteration, then that's worthy of discussion. But you do want to stay consistent. But sometimes these norms and rules for administration will be different. This is in general, right? The students, when a student substitutes another word for a word in the text, it's an error, right? We can all agree on that. When the student omits a word, we can agree that that's an error. When the student inserts a word, that's an error, okay? And when a student has to be told that a word is by the replacement word, when the student has to be told the replacement word by the teacher who's administering it. There's one more that's not on here, and that's when a student misreads a proper noun. And I've seen this in different ways. So if it's a name and a student mispronounces the name and they do it the same way consistently, you can count that as one error. If a student misreads the proper noun and offers up a substitution that's different every time, then that's a little different. Okay, then I think that you would treat that as an error. I'm just looking, I want to make sure that I address your questions.
We're all set right now.
Okay. So this is the part where this is the reason you're not going to be able to walk away from here if you haven't done this before, doing this brilliantly. it is hard to remember all of these different symbols. And I remember learning about this thinking, meh, I'm just going to use my own symbols and not worry about it. And that's okay for your internal classroom, informal running records. The thing is, when we as a grade level team, right, want to work together and want to go into the collaborative scoring or the calibration, or you want a colleague to be able to check your running records, and you also want to be able to transfer a student's running records with them to the following grade, right? The next teacher needs to be able to interpret that information. And so I would encourage you over time to use the appropriate marker, coding for errors. I'm going to go through this just because, even though you can see it, in case anyone has questions, right? So a simple substitution makes sense. You put a line and you write what the student, I'm just starting from up top, right? If the student's reading, you put a line and you put the word that they said, that they substituted, okay? This makes sense too, right? Where if the kid went and said 3 different things, you put all 3 things on the line. Then the next one, the self-correction, you write what the student said initially, and then you can just put in self-correct if they corrected themselves. So the repetition was always the one that threw me for a loop. Because I always wanted to write just 2x, like put parentheses around it and put 2x. But this is the formal coding. So you put an R there, right? And then you see that arrow that goes back that indicates that a student said that phrase twice. You can see there repetition with self-correction is the combination of the arrow and the self-correction. And omission is a line, right? So if the student today, to my new school, you just put a line there. An insertion makes sense because that's how we edit written text, right? You put the little caret up there. The sounding out makes sense, right? You're putting dots or short lines in between, like it was drawn out. And for spelling, it's in capitals, because the student's saying the letter names. Appeal is A, and an appeal means the student stops, doesn't make a guess on their own, and just asks the teacher. And then told is when you have helped, and you just put a T there. Okay. And then a pause, like is the hatch sign. All right. And you can see over here on the right what is scored as an error and what is not. And I just want to, when a word is read incorrectly multiple times, each incorrect reading counts as an error, unless the word is a proper noun read in the exact same way. Okay. How are we doing with questions around that, Beth? I see the chat numbers going up.
Well, that's because I was responding to people and I realized I had all panelists answered instead of all attendees. There's another question at Q&A. I see the numbers moved to 2, but again, I can't see that.
No, it's okay. I think I answered that question. It was about proper nouns.
Okay.
Kelly, I hope I answered.
All good. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. So we can see how we're doing with time. Okay, this is the part that's also, it's hard. This stuff's hard. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be hard, but it's hard. We've categorized the different queuing systems that a student has available to them through these 3 different categories. And from the visual here, it's showing you that it takes all of these different queuing systems to make sense, to understand what you're reading. So on the top, and I would go with meaning, structure, and visual, the text in black. because it's hard to remember semantic, syntactic, and graphophonic unless you're hell-bent on sounding, you know, highly expert for some reason. But, you know, I think it's better to go with regular old language when in doubt. Some meaning. Does the student's attempt, so a student comes up to a word that they're unsure of while they're reading, does their substitution make sense in the context of that current sentence and everything that the student has read before? So that's what that means. And if a student has made a guess that makes that sense, then indeed they have used meaning as a cue. Down on the left, when we go to structure, does it sound right? And that's a very broad question. And what that means is, does it sound right for the English language? Is it the right verb tense? Okay. Is it a noun where a noun is necessary? That kind of thing. And say, so it sounds like within the context of our language, does it sound right? And then the graphophonic, or the visual, does it look right? So is a student using initial letter sound? Is a student using an ending? Is a student using a vowel combination in the middle of the word? Is it a super short little word like the or he or she, where a student could just be flying by and it looked a certain way and they made that guess? And we're going to go into this a little bit more. This is basically what I just said. And I'm going to just give you a second to look at this slide before I keep talking and give you a rest from my voice for a second so you can process. Okay. Just talking a little bit about meaning, I think something that we need to remember is that the pictures are also included in the meaning and whether a student is using meaning as part of their cueing system. Okay. So, here we're going to have some fun. Are you ready? And I'm going to try to do a poll with you. So, oh no, I didn't put this in presentation mode, and before I ran it in oh, I'm so disappointed. So just to get the visual for you, there were checks above the slide. Hold on, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to escape and show. Okay, and we'll look at it this way. Sorry about that. Let me, everybody, can you see that, Beth?
Yes.
Okay, so here is our slide. And this is the error that the student made, right? The dog runned beyond the shed. And what I want you guys to think about is, when the student substituted the word runned for ran, what cues was that student using? I'm just going to go back to here. Was it a meaning cue, right? Does the word that the student substituted make sense? Does it sound right in our English language syntax? And does it look right? Or did a student use specific visual cues, patterns from the word to make the guess? So you decide, and I'm going to try to do this polling. Are you ready? So I'm launching a poll, and you guys are all going to respond. You should be seeing an opportunity to guess. And it can be more than one, by the way. I'm just giving it a second. 39 of 65. Keep going, everyone. All right, 46. One more minute. 49. We want total participation. Isn't that what we're after? We need a model for our kids, total participation. Kagan structures for total participation. You're doing good, 52. All right, you're maxing out. So 75% of you felt that the student used meaning as a cue for their guess. 33 of you felt that the student used the structure of the word or the syntax, right? And that it sounded right in the sentence as a form of speech. And 37% of you felt that there was a visual component to the student's guess. Okay, now, oh good, let me just get that out of here. Okay, let's see, here's the answer. So, the student used meaning, right? Because run basically means the same and whoops. Means the same and generates the same meaning. And visual, right? Because that first letter, R, run, rand, right? So we see that, that overlap. And for structure, the student, when we speak in the English language, right, the dog runned beyond the shed doesn't quite sound right. So I think that this student did not use, I mean, the hypothesis of the student was not using structure. Whereas if the student had said the dog walked beyond the shed, right, that would have been structure because it is the same verb tense and it sounds right in spoken language. Next, here's another one. I'm going to launch the poll again. Relaunch poll 1. Here we go. Okay. You're up, guys. Down the side of the hill, rush the rock. What has the student used? I see learning going on. Our stats are improving. All right, you ready? So 80% felt that the student used meaning, 80% structure, right, sound of the English language, and 9% visual. Let's see. Awesome. Perfect. Down the side of the hill went the rock. Certainly went fits in that sentence and likely within the context of the passage. And it makes sense, right? Structurally, that sounds perfectly fine in the English language. It's perfect. And the visual, not so much. One more, 2 more actually. Here's example 3. Oh no, he said, sadly. And I'm going to launch the poll again. And this is a hard one actually, and I'll explain why. All right, so 48% of you felt that the student used meaning. 60 more, actually your numbers are changing as I'm speaking. 46% felt that meaning was used. 63% felt that the student's guess coincided with correct structure, and then visual. Awesome. Okay, it was 88% felt that this kid used visual cues. I'm going to go to the answer. Oh no, he said suddenly. So the student has used all of their cueing for this particular guess. And this is how, so, and the thing that is a little bit questionable is the meaning, because we don't know the context of the story. And if a student is understanding the story and the background of the story suggests that that the word suddenly wouldn't make sense for the meaning of this particular story, then we have to keep that in mind. But for this particular sentence in isolation, meaning, yes, absolutely. For structure, it sounds right? It's the same, it's an adverb, and it sounds correct. And then for that visual cueing system, the kid's done great, right? We have the first letter correspondence, and then the LY correspondence. We have some D's in there. So there's a lot of cues. We're going to use one more, and here we go. I may be as thick as a stick. What kind of, let me just relaunch. Error. What cues was the student using? We have very strong visual. And that is certainly indisputable. All right, so meaning not so much, 6%, structure 13%, 15%, and then for visual, that was 94%. Indeed, this student has used visual. And for structure, right, for the English language and making sense within the English language, doesn't make sense, right? Doesn't sound, I, many, be as thin as a stick. Nope. And for meaning, it takes away the meaning of the sentence. The sentence becomes sort of nonsensical at that point. Nice job, everybody. Thank you for participating. I appreciate it. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go back to presenter mode. All right. I gotta move along. So I'm gonna start talking without interacting for a little bit. And then just please write in your questions and your comments. So just in terms of self-corrections, it's the same thing, right? So the student over here made a mistake. Okay, you can see, and then self-corrected, right? And they use the visual to correct themselves. So this kid is like, combing, I definitely, that coincides with correct meaning. It coincides with appropriate structure and the way our English language sounds, but it's not right. So I looked at the first letter. I'm just talking as the student. I looked at the first letter and I made another guess, and I self-corrected myself based on that visual piece. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, what does it mean, right? And at the end of doing your miscue analysis, you count up the number of different cues, of the 3 different cues that a student has used. So in the ideal world, right, a student is equally using all cueing strategies. In a realistic world, right, a student may be using meaning far more than he or she is using the visual piece, right, or structure, right? So you can see this imbalance by counting up those errors and thinking about it. And then you know that in your individual instruction with that student, you then know what kind of cues to prompt that student to try to use. And that's how that changes your instruction. Okay, moving on to fluency, because, right, this is another great piece that we get from running records. And I just wanted to give you these. All of the documents I'm about to show are available to you on our public site. And Delia has raised her hand. Oh, I would love to unmute you, Delia. Delia, have at it. Hi. Oh, I'm trying to unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Hello.
Hi. I love your presentation so far. It's right on.
Oh, good.
I was trained by F&P down in Cambridge years ago,
Great.
and I believe I've been making errors in my meaning, structure, visual. When you look at a student afterwards to see what kind of analysis you can do on that student, I believe I look at he's not using structure enough, so I use that to help him decode more heavily. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But I think does that contradict what I said?
Not at all.
Okay.
I just look at, oh, he's always using meaning. Now, what can I do to strengthen his use of structure and his use of visual cues?
Good. So that was a shift for you.
Yes.
I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Okay. Yay.
You can mute me.
Okay. I don't want to, but I guess I have to. Okay. So, so you guys, this is available to you on our site, and afterwards, normally in the past, we've been able to send a link automatically to all of the resources, but we're going to do that manually this time. This is there for you. This is a Tim Rosinski rubric, and I downloaded it right from the internet. So it's there for you, but we also have it for you. It's a good rubric. It's lovely to use a fluency rubric because then we don't get overly focused on the words per minute, right? Fluency is so important because it speaks to comprehension as well, okay? And if students not fluent in certain ways, it's likely they're not comprehending the passage. If they're not going down at the end of sentences and pausing, you know, all of that has to do with comprehension. So I just wanted to offer that to you. I'm offering you two different tools for thinking about words per minute. This is called National Oral Reading Fluency Norms, but I don't want you to think for a second that fluency is only related to rate, words per minute. So this is one, and this is very, very well known, widely accepted, and by using this, you're not subscribing to any particular product or person per se. So this is there, and it even gives you fall, winter, and spring for each grade level and the 50th percentile. So we have this for you. This is F&Ps. Okay, so I'm sure many of you are using this, and there's nothing wrong with it at all if you're using F&P. I just wanted to make sure that folks that didn't have that resource had resources. Okay. There it is again. Okay. So you can see that we're going to go to comprehension now, but fluency is another big piece that you get. And I didn't actually go into calculating words per minute. And it's basically taking the, and I may misspeak here because I didn't think about it beforehand, and I'm the kind of math person that has to really think about it beforehand. But you take the number of errors and then divide it by the total. Oh, we're going to have to go back to this. And if anybody would like to jump in, because I'm sure at least 50% of you on the call can give language to this. I'm actually going to go right now to the chat. All right. I'll get back to you on that, but there's the mathematics. It makes sense. All right.
And just for everybody to know, sorry, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but all of our webinars are available on our YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube Demonstrated Success, and it will probably take a day before this webinar is listed up there. But all of our previous webinars are up there, and this will be up there as well within about 24 hours. And we will send you all your professional development certificate. If you can give us until tomorrow, right around the lunch hour, they will all be in your mailbox. If by chance they're not, feel free to reach out to me, elizabeth.dion@demonstratedsuccess.com, and I'll make sure you have that as well. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah. I'm just thinking still, I'm stuck on the words per minute. So it's the number of words, right, divided by, okay, I'm not even gonna try it right now. It's a lot of pressure. I'll send it to you when I send the resources. Thanks. Okay, Retell comprehension. So most of the tools that you will use will come with some sort of comprehension piece, and it'll either be a set of questions, right? So literal questions, inferential questions, and oftentimes the tool will also come with a retelling rubric where they list sort of the foundational happenings of the story that a student would most definitely remember if they were doing a retell. And this goes back to someone at the beginning talked about prompting, right? And this again is different for different tools. So it's important that if you're working with your grade level team, that you come up with the same norms for this if you want to deviate from the tool. If you're not using a tool of some sort, but you're sort of, you're using a book that a student's reading and you're using a blank running record tool sheet to record, I would go with anything else. You can say things like, say more about that. Tell me the big things that happened in the story, right? And then just write down any prompts that you wind up giving a student. And this is sometimes a surprise for teachers, and this is certainly within Fontes and Pinnell, and I believe that this is best practice. A student is allowed to go back to a text and reread to answer a question as long as they use their own language, as long as you're sure they're not parroting back. And I'm just saying here that if you're using a text, if you're using a book that is in a student's book box, let's say, and you're using a blank running record form, it's okay for you to create your own retelling criteria and to come up with questions. If you can preview it beforehand, to come up with questions that will prompt that student's understanding of the text. And not just literal, right? We want to continue, make sure that we get to the inferential piece. Okay, here are some tools for you. And again, this will, we will share the PowerPoint with you. So you do not have to, feel free to take a picture of the slide, but you also can just have this. These are a bunch that are available for you. Everyone knows Fontes and Pinnell. The QRI is probably best for 3rd, 4th grade and above. The DRA, most folks are familiar with the DRA. It's been around for a while. The Beta Reading and Language Inventory is something that I've been using for 100 years. It's a really nice tool. I think it's very good for the younger, like, pre-K through 3rd, and it goes through down to pre-K. The Analytical Reading Inventory is a good one. Informal Reading Inventory is another one. And then Columbia Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. If you go on the internet and Google that, they have free running record materials. And they're from Columbia and they're reliable. So you can also, if you don't have a tool and you don't feel like spending it could be $30 for the Beta Reading and Language Inventory or one of these books. These books are just, they're spirals. The QRI, sorry, this is a typo, is it's just a spiral and it's not very expensive. Okay. So I just wanted to address the online issue. I was having a conversation with a literacy specialist friend of mine, and she's like, Karen, the basics really don't change. It's the same thing. You're just doing it online. And the beautiful thing about this is because it's one-on-one, you have options, right? So, and some people, right, can share a window. The high tech option is to share a window through conferencing. And then there's two tools called Bullclip and Drawboard, which actually allow you to take a PDF running record form and write directly on it while you're online. So that's something for all you techies out there that you can go and explore. Another thing is to use video conferencing again, right? But then just have the student have a hard copy, right? So you can download an article or a book or a piece of text from Reading A to Z, and you can send it to the student, and that student can print it, and or the parents, right, could print it, and they will have a hard copy and they will read, and you will sit with your hard copy and mark it up. And then you can also use electronic text where a student is reading directly from the screen, and you can get that from Reading A to Z or Lexiled sites. So like Common Lit and News ELA are Lexiled, and so that'll allow you to know where you're starting your student. There's also an asynchronous option through RazKids Plus, which I think is new, where you set your students up and then you send in their learning management system a text that you want them to read, and the student sends you back, or doesn't have to send you back because it's within the RazKids, they push a button, and then the student has a recording of their text, and then you can listen to it and do a running record on that student. Right, so those are some options for you to explore if you're in the situation of doing this online. You know, and that's another thing, if you don't feel like you're going to meet with your kids one-on-one at the beginning of the year in person, you have that option to do it online, although I'm not thinking it's a great idea. But, you know, if we go online in December because there's been an outbreak, it allows you to still collect running record information. Okay, phonemic awareness. We're almost done. I'm just looking at the time. This is basically a visual that tells you the development of phonemic awareness skills. And I am not going to go into this now because the webinar is not about that in depth. But what I wanted to show this to you is because these are the skills that you are going to want to assess for your students. And what I'm going to offer you now, because we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to make you aware of some of the tools, right, that you can use for these types of assessments that are super quick, one-on-one, informal, again, can be done during conferencing in 2 minutes. So, and to make sure that you understood what these different skills are. So we have, for phonemic awareness, which means the student does not have letters or symbols in front of them. This is all about, phonemic awareness is all about a student's ability to play with sound and be aware of the sounds that make up our English language. So these are some different short activities that you can do with kids to figure this out. So for syllable blending, right, you say 2 syllables and you ask the student to blend them, right? If I say open, what did I say? Open, right? Syllable segmentation, can you tell me the 2 word parts of open? And then the student says O and pen. And this is the fun one. I love this one. This, I forgot what the assessment is called. But say open without the pen. The kids have fun with this, right? So then it's O. And it's super fun. If you don't make a big deal out of it, the kids can have a lot of fun with that. So phoneme isolation, right? What's the first sound in sat? S. What's the last sound in sat? T. Phoneme isolation in the middle sound. What's the middle sound in sat? Ah. What word do these sounds make? Hot. The response is hot, right? That's for blending. For segmenting, how many sounds do you hear in the word hot. Okay. And what sounds do you hear? That would be impressive. Phoneme manipulation, say mat without the we did that a little bit earlier, without the t, and then substitution at the end, right? Now change, say pig, now change the p to a f, and then. So these are all things that you can do with students to figure out where they are with the phonemic awareness. Obviously, that would be K through 2, unless a student had K through 1, really, unless a student, or K mostly, right? 1 partway through the year. But, you know, students may have different abilities. So when we talk about decoding, right, we're talking about symbols and reading symbols. And so this is just a list of some of the really basic decoding and encoding skills that you would be looking at with some of these assessments. Beginning, ending sounds, middle sounds, the ability to sound out a CVC or a CCVC. So CVC is a word like cat. It's a consonant, a vowel, and a consonant. A CCVC would be the word brat, right? Because there's a B and an R, those are consonants. A is the vowel, and then the T at the end is a consonant again. Blending, so a blend is the BR or the BL or the CR or the CL. It's 2 consonants together. Consonant digraphs are consonants that form a single sound. So when you put a TH together, it's th or th, right? And CVC is basically your long E words. And then these are some different lists of graded sight words. All of this, again, is super short and super unthreatening for students. So here I have listed all of these assessments that are completely free that we have for you in our site as resources. Actually, not every one of them. So like the Words Their Way, you can download and find on the internet Words Their Way, spelling inventories. Obviously, the whole program is not free. But everything down here I have in PDF for you. And everything up here, yes, I have in PDF for you. So afterwards, you will be able to explore those different assessments. Okay, we're at the end. Here are the reasons, right? Here are our takeaways. I love that these types of assessments build relationship. They're personalized, individualized for a student's need. They provide actionable information. When you understand these different types of assessments, you also grow your skills as a teacher of reading, as opposed to sitting a kid down in front of the STAR assessment or the NWEA. They can be quite low cost, quite quick. Then also you can reassess at your discretion, as opposed to waiting for the, the spring or winter administration of NWEA. The data can be aggregated. So this is kind of cool too. If you're a K1 or 2 teacher and you want to sit with your professional learning community and talk about where your kids are with, basic phonics skills, phonemic awareness skills, decoding skills, or even what they're using for strategies for decoding during a running record, all of this can be aggregated, and you can have amazing conversations with your grade level peers, your colleagues, around, oh, most of our kids are using the visual cue, but we need to help them to use cues of meaning or syntax better. So let's talk about different strategies to do that. Data can be collected during a quick reading conference, right? Or during guided reading. You can collect some quick data on a student and have the other students read, the next 3 pages on their own. And then also this data can be collected online. Okay, before I'm gonna go back to this, I wanna pause for a second and make sure before we get off that there aren't major conversations still to be had and that folks don't have some questions. I'd love it. If anybody wants to raise their hand and chit chat at this point, it would be fabulous. Going once?
I don't see anything.
All right. These are our upcoming webinars. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planned. On the 28th, it's going to be all about administering the interim and the modular benchmark assessments, the NHSAS. And the 4th, creating a local assessment in Google Forms, Khan Academy. I'm going to be doing the 9th. I've been exploring Common Lit, and it's an absolutely outstanding resource at this point. So, and you can even track data in Common Lit. And then we're going to talk about performance assessments on August 18th. Here's Beth and I. Thank you, Beth, so much for joining me and everyone today. And that's our contact info. And that's it.